One moment I have a memory of just driving in the car, and then my next memory is lying on the ground with a firefighter leaning over me.
Grant and Nikki Carroll and their children were stuck in traffic on a Texas interstate when Nikki remembered a terrible dream she'd had.
I had a dream we were going to be hit from behind. And so I remember turning around, seeing no cars whatsoever in our lane, and just being relieved.
Seconds later, a semi-truck drifted into their lane, crashing into the back of their car at 73 miles per hour.
We were hit, and then we flew into another 15-passenger van. The first moments were just kind of eerily quiet.
Nikki assessed their situation.
The very first screams that happened was when I turned around and saw Cadyn unconscious. There was no life in Cadyn at all. He was foaming at the mouth, totally slumped over. I remember just begging Jesus not to take my firstborn son. Jesus, don't take my son. Please don't take my son. I went to go hold his head because of course the very first thing I thought was like stabilize his head. And then I just remember having to make a choice because we smelled gas to let go of his head to get all the other children out of the car. And from my point of view, when I let go of his head, I felt like I was letting go of my son.
Emergency personnel arrived soon after and began intubating 7-year-old Cadyn. Nikki turned to God for hope and began singing.
They took him out on the stretcher and they had him on the ground. And I just kind of laid down beside him on the pavement and just kept singing.
Grant had been knocked unconscious and woke up concerned about his children.
The feeling of being helpless and not knowing, it's the worst feeling, one of the worst feelings I've ever had in my life. I was worried that I'd lost one of them or that someone was dead, and it was terrifying.
Cadyn was rushed to McLean Children's Hospital. Dr. Lisa Chapa and a team of doctors diagnosed Cadyn's injuries.
He had something we call diffuse axonal injury, shearing of the neurons in the brain. And it doesn't happen in just one spot, it kind of happens globally.
Their diagnosis was dire. And they were trying to prepare us for the fact that we shouldn't expect Cadyn to be himself ever again.
We did not expect a great neurologic recovery at all. We expected prolonged, if not permanent, neurologic deficits that would be quite limiting for the rest of his life.
It was terrifying, it was heartbreaking. The thought of losing him or him being in a vegetative state, just, I lost it. We both lost it. We were both weeping.
Despite the poor prognosis, Grant and Nikki say they both had a supernatural peace, knowing God was in control of their son's recovery.
I would say within like 10 minutes of kind of hearing that news and being alone with God in the hospital room, I clearly heard God say, claim it. You're right, they're right. He's not gonna be the same. You're not gonna have the same son, ever. But it's not what they think. He's gonna have a hope in the future and he's gonna have a testimony.
He's going to be stronger than ever, he's going to be a spiritual warrior like never before.
For a week, Cadyn remained in a coma. Doctors gave little hope that he would wake up anytime soon. Grant and Nikki prayed and believed for a miracle.
We had people coming and fasting and praying, and there were nights where I could feel prayer. I could feel my arms being lifted up.
It was like constant prayer. We didn't sleep much at all. The nurses were coming in and out. We're just singing, raising hands, worshiping, praying.
So at 3 o'clock in the morning, we turned on praise music and we just danced around him and worshiped. And we did it until the sun came up.
The sun's coming through his window. It was just like coming down on his face, and we were both like, Cadyn, wake up. And he opened his eyes and looked at us. It was amazing. And
he woke up. Just like I just woken him up this morning.
I saw in that moment, I was like, I have my son back. The Lord gave me my son back. So that was a very joyful moment, to see the fruition of what God had promised and what we had been hoping and believing and praying through that whole week.
To the doctor's amazement, Cadyn was awake and responsive, but the extent of his brain damage was still unknown. Grant and Nikki continued to pray.
Because of the frontal lobe injury that he had in his brain, he didn't have the capacity to speak yet. And I just, with tears, I said, Cadyn, are you ever gonna talk to mommy again? And he looked at me and said, yes. And it was like, we started screaming, we texted everyone, we got the doctor to come back. And from then on, he never stopped talking.
Cadyn had a miraculous recovery. It's something beyond what we could have expected or hoped for in and of ourselves.
The only way to make sense of his recovery, in my mind, is that it's the absolute hand of God touching him.
With Cadyn recovering, we know that specific prayers were going out when we needed them. And we know that God answered specific prayers.
Through the next week in the hospital, Cadyn's recovery progressed beyond anyone's expectations, even overcoming partial paralysis on his left side.
You started just kind of wanting the doctors to say other things he couldn't do, because that same day, God would prove them wrong.
He's not the same boy at all, and I'm thankful that he's not the same boy. I think that now he's more incredible than he could have ever been without this event.
2 weeks after the accident, Cadyn walked out of the hospital. He remembers the challenge of relearning everyday tasks.
Everything was basically hard, I would say, but I'm glad that I got to the goal where they're not hard anymore.
Cadyn has memorized large portions of Scripture and participates in Bible Bee competitions. Not bad for a boy who suffered a traumatic brain injury.
For you are called to freedom, brothers, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
Their faith and the prayers of people all over the world, as I know they were praying for Cadyn, really impacted his recovery.
Grant and Nikki say it was the power of God that saved their son. They remain in awe of their experience with him in their time of need.
It seems strange to say that I'm thankful that this happened, but I wouldn't want to go back to who I was before. I don't think we would have gotten through the accident or the recovery without the power of prayer.
I am so thankful every day for my precious, wonderful son and what God has done, and for the story he's given us. The Lord just showed me time and again, you can trust me. He's saying, you can trust me. He really is in control, and he really does have your best interests at heart, and he really does have a heart to heal, and a heart to save, and a heart to bring you through.